What happened when the heavens fell silent? Have you ever wondered what happened between Jesus' last breath on the cross and his glorious resurrection? What really happened in that silent interval we now call Holy Saturday? The calendar moves forward between the Friday of sorrows and the Sunday of glory. But there is a day in between, laden with unfathomable mystery, a day that tradition often overlooks, but which in the spiritual history of humanity resonates as one of the most momentous moments ever experienced. That Saturday was not an empty pause. As the Master's body lay in a new tomb, something indescribable was happening on the invisible planes of existence. It was the moment when eternity bent toward history to fulfill a purpose that had been foretold since the dawn of time. In the sepulchral silence of that day, the most powerful proclamation was issued at the very center of the spiritual universe. Prepare to delve into a story not often told from pulpits, but one that can radically transform the way you understand redemption. What happened when all seemed lost, when creation was silent, was the boldest act of divine love. The silence that cries out. The city of Jerusalem was suspended in an unnatural silence. It wasn't simply the calm of the Sabbath. It was a dense stillness, as if even the air refused to move. The streets were empty. The markets were closed. And the usual sounds of Shabbat seemed to have been supplanted by an invisible sense of weight and dread. This wasn't a Saturday like any other. It was the first full day without Jesus in the world. The voices of the religious leaders were masks hardened by duty, but beneath them burned an ill-disguised anxiety. The temple veil, torn from top to bottom after the Nazarene's death, still hung like an open wound in the heart of Jewish worship. No one could explain how it had happened, but everyone knew it was no coincidence. Meanwhile, in the borrowed tomb of a righteous man, Jesus' lifeless body lay. Roman soldiers stood guard with the strange tension of those who don't understand why they are afraid. They didn't know that their weapons and vigilance were powerless against what was happening in another dimension. A journey beyond death. In the invisible world, while the world slept, Jesus' spirit never rested. His body, motionless and covered with linen, rested in the tomb. But his soul descended to a realm older than time, the realm of the dead. This was not a metaphor or a spiritual hallucination, but a reality as concrete as the cross itself. The scriptures speak of Sheol, a Hebrew term designating the place where souls go after death. It was not yet the burning hell of medieval imagination, but a kind of eternal waiting room. There, the souls of all, both righteous and wicked, waited. Into that in-between state, where time dissolves and consciousness lingers, like an echo, Jesus entered, not as a victim, but as a victor. The chambers of Hades. Over time, understanding of that invisible world expanded. Greek philosophical influences gave it the name Hades and described it as divided. On one side, a place of torment. On the other, a place of peace, known as Abraham's bosom, where the righteous rested. Jesus descended into both regions, but for different purposes. It was not to suffer again, but to proclaim an unstoppable truth. His presence in that realm of shadows was an eruption of light. The darkness, accustomed to despair, was shaken by a holy vibration. Those who had died, clinging to God's promise, though without having seen it fulfilled, now perceived that its fulfillment had arrived. Prophecies that awakened the ancient prophets, not fully understanding what they were seeing, had left clues. The psalmist said that God would not leave his soul in Sheol. The prophet Isaiah spoke of a suffering servant who would be exalted. Paul would later explain, Jesus descended to the lower parts of the earth. Ephesians chapter 4:9. Peter would add that he preached to the spirits in prison. 1 Peter 3:19. In that descent, God's justice and mercy were revealed in a single act. It was not a second chance for the wicked. It was a divine proclamation. The Messiah had conquered. The sacrifice was complete. Access to God would now be opened forever. Echoes of recognition. Imagine the scene in Abraham's bosom. Abraham himself, who saw stars as a promise, now beheld the eternal Son. Moses, who saw only God's back, now beheld him face to face. David, the psalmist, who prophesied so much about the Anointed One, fell face down before his Lord. Isaiah, who had seen his glory from afar, was now in his presence. Jesus walked among them, not as a visitor, but as the fulfillment of all that had been hoped for. He needed no introduction. Every soul knew, with absolute certainty, who he was. The atmosphere was filled with the antient a new fullness, as if time had stopped to pay homage to eternity made flesh. From silence to procession. The words Jesus spoke in that place were not many, but they were eternal. I have come for you. With those few syllables, the entire spiritual heavens opened. The veil that separated humankind from the glory of God disintegrated. What had once been an insurmountable barrier was now a path opened by the blood of a spotless lamb. And then the unthinkable happened. A procession began to form. These were not prisoners emerging from their cells, but heirs receiving their adoption. The righteous souls of the old covenant rose up, enlivened by the presence of the Redeemer. They were headed to heaven, not by their merits, but by the merit of the Son of God. While on earth everything seemed at a standstill, in the heart of the invisible realm, the most sacred of spiritual migrations was taking place. Witness in the abyss. But Jesus' proclamation did not end there. He also addressed another group, the fallen angels, the spirits who had been imprisoned for their rebellion. In that darkest corner of Hades, where utter hopelessness reigned, Jesus did not preach redemption, but judgment. His mere presence was enough. They knew that the plan they had tried to thwart since Eden had been consummated. The Lamb had won. The Logos had endured. God's love had broken the cycle of sin and death, and that truth was now irreversible. The gates shall not prevail. Death, accustomed to devouring all without exception, had now swallowed something it could not contain. Jesus was not a resigned guest. He was a conqueror with supreme authority. The ancient bronze gates of Hades began to give way, not with a physical crash, but with a spiritual crack that shook the realms of evil. Death, until then unconquered, understood that it had been defeated from within. He who defeated it did not do so with earthly weapons, but with perfect obedience, with absolute surrender, with unconditional love. The untold story. The Gospels narrate the Passion and Resurrection in detail, but the mystery of Holy Saturday has often been veiled by oblivion. However, it is there, in that sacred interval, that the most powerful invisible work in history unfolded. Jesus was not inactive. He did not sleep. He did not wait. He descended to fulfill, to proclaim, to liberate. And you? What will you do with this truth? We often speak of the cross as the culmination, and of the resurrection as the final triumph. But between the two lies this theological and spiritual jewel, the descent of the Messiah into the realm of death. It was not a symbolic act. It was a cosmic movement, a courageous step toward the core of human suffering, a holy mission that sealed, in its depths, the eternal covenant. Redemption was not just a judicial transaction. It was a battle, a conquest, a journey into the abyss to bring his own from the shadows into the light. And what Jesus did that day still resonates, because the same one who descended is the one who ascended and is seated at the right hand of God. He who took your place on the cross, who descended for you into the dust of death, can also raise you to the life that never dies. Epilogue, the echo of Holy Saturday. That Saturday was not a parenthesis. It was a proclamation. In the language of the eternal, in the vibration of the invisible, in the echo of the human soul, the voice of the Son of God can still be heard. I have won. And in that silent cry, everything changed, because heaven fell silent, so that hell would know it no longer had the last word.